Well, good. So the first thing that I'll say is that breath work for me, the idea of having a breath work practice, I've done yoga for a really long time, but at the time when I really started doing breath work, I probably had been doing yoga for 15 years at that point. And the idea of doing breath work as a standalone practice sounded like a ridiculous idea. I will use the word stupid to describe that, right? Like, I'm already doing a lot of yoga 4 to 5 times a week. I do pranayama. I sync the breath with my movement, blah, 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 blah. So the idea of doing breath work in addition to that just did not make any sense to me. And so just like most things that drive positive change in our lives, it was pain that sort of sent me down this path. And I'll just give you a little bit of background. So I got into breath work through recovery from alcoholism. If people don't like that term, alcohol addiction, whatever you want to call it, I drank too much. Right? And so that's the place that I came in. Now I had 10 years of sobriety, AA program, work the steps to a certain level. And after that period of time, life started lifing, things got tough. I was carrying a lot of anger, and I relapsed, and I started a process of trying to stop and then drinking again and trying to stop and then drinking again. And then things got really rough towards the end of 2019. And I hit a point, very low bottom, and I'm like, I need to stop again. I need to stop. That's what I need to do. I just need to stop drinking, start there, move forward. So they anytime somebody is stopping anything, alcohol, drugs, and I don't want to I don't want to take away any other mild forms of compulsion or compulsive behavior or addiction. I call it a running joke, but it's the first 30 days are 30 days and 1,000 nights, because during that time, when we're really going through the process of resetting our relationship to that dopamine source, during that period, those reward pathways are still very much intact. You take away the dopamine source, all of that stuff is still firing in your brain, and your thoughts and your behaviors and your tolerance of triggers. It's a tough period, right? And so I was probably 2 weeks into that 30 days, and when I would go into meetings, I would just rant. It's like I got to a meeting, I could make a comment, and when I commented, it was just unloading all of the craziness in my head, right? All of the resentment, all of the shame, all of the guilt, all that stuff. I was just unloading it. And after one meeting, a guy came up to me, and I've known him for a really long time, but he always kind of like kept to himself. And he would make comments in meetings almost with this sort of like rhetorical tone. Not that he's like a smarty pants guy, but you could just tell that he knew stuff, right? You could tell that he knew stuff. And he's like 6'4", really imposing guy. Like, the best way to think about him is he looks like a sort of a big Russian mobster guy that's kind of got, sort of a pimped out veneer, just,
okay,
somebody
like
from
total
the underworld
ego
almost.
Oh,
right. So
okay.
No, not ego, not ego. Just an older fella who looks like he's been around, and he likes to curate his outfit, and he does it in a way where it's just got a little gangster to it, right? And he's a fun guy, and he just came up, and he's like, "Do you breathe, man? Do you breathe?" And when he asked that, I almost wanted to jump into this. Well, I've been doing yoga for 15 years and I'm very familiar with pranayama and I see the benefit of breath and I always sync it with my movement in yoga class and blah, 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 blah. So I almost started going into that. And he's just like, no, do you breathe? Do you have a breathwork practice? And I was like, no, Tom, I don't. Okay, I don't. You got me. I do not. And he's like, okay, next time your mind is racing, I want you to do something. I want you to just sit up, take an inhale through your nose, and when you get to the top, exhale through your nose. And when you're doing that, what I want you to do is think to yourself, this is my inhale. And when you're exhaling, think to yourself, this is my exhale. Just do that. Next time your mind's flying, just do that. And I was at the point, you know, one of the great things about pain is that it can create so much humility in us where we're like, okay, I'm open to suggestions, right? I'm open to suggestions. Let's go, you know? And so I was like, Tom, I can do that. He went into, you know, a couple minutes around the origins of that in terms of it being one of the core and simplest and first Buddhist mantras really oriented around the breath. And I didn't really catch all the detail there. All I knew is that my mind was racing. It was a really tough spot. And if there was something that could slow it down, I was all for it. So it was that week and I was doing laundry and I was folding laundry and my mind just started to go. It just started to race. And so I started to think to myself, maybe I should do the thing that Tom said. And so I started. And when I started, I was thinking, but then I really just locked into this is my inhale, this is my exhale. This is my inhale, this is my exhale. And as I was doing it, if I would pause a little bit, I could see the thoughts come in, right? Like sort of the snakes almost, right? But if I kept that breath going, it would keep those snakes back. And I just kept doing it. And after about 75 minutes, it was time to go to the meeting. And that moment, I never felt more empowered in terms of a tool that I could use to influence my thinking, to influence my mind, to be able to put me into a better place. Now, at the point in time, I had no idea really what was going on. I had no idea what it was doing as it relates to my nervous system. I had no idea in terms of the relationship that it had to other autonomic functions within my body that were throwing me off. I had no understanding to when we stop doing something, the established reward pathways that are in our brain that we really need to rewire, and how breath work can be so helpful to all those things. But what I did know is that it stopped my mind for a bit. It stopped these thoughts. And so as soon as I saw that, you know, that is sort of what sent me down this path. And it's not only a path of breath work, but it's also I'm a big fan of the framework of the 12 steps and how that can be applied to a variety of things that we want to rewire our brains. And not saying 12 steps specifically, like I abstract them a little bit, but a lot of the main pillars are still there. And so how breath work relates to that, and then understanding the neuroscience of how it works together. For me, as I started to learn that more and more, it became very powerful in terms of building conviction. So I keep going down this path. But the other thing that I think it does for somebody new is that when they have a little bit of an understanding of the science as to why it's working, that understanding translates to hope. And if people have hope, that can be a really powerful thing. So that's why I kind of like to talk about all three of them in a little bit of a
Yeah, that's
unified
great.
way.
Do you get a lot of people that come to you that have addiction problems that have discovered that breathwork helps? Like, have you experienced that?
I would say that a lot of people, the something that is unifying is that, and I do think that this is a great term in terms of healing journeys, because people are on healing journeys for different things, whether it's toxic relationships, or whether it's physical or emotional trauma, or both. There's a healing component that breath work provides. Addiction recovery for sure, depression for sure, anxiety for sure, which is a little tricky one because a lot of times breathing doesn't feel super comfortable to somebody that's dealing with anxiety, and we can talk about why as we jump into this a little bit more. So yeah, I would say that people in some shape, form, or another are on a healing journey at some level, and
Wow.
it's great to have them along.
Well, that's wonderful. Do you want to share anything about what you were learning about the neuroscience behind it? Do you have anything to share that would help maybe some people watching kind of make it click as to why maybe they should do this?
Sure. Yeah, I could go into that. And it's interesting because breath work is like any other thing. If you think about yoga, you've got Ashtanga, you've got Bikram, you've got Vinyasa, you've got Hatha, you've got all these different forms of yoga. If you're lifting, you can do Olympic lifting, you can do CrossFit. There's a variety of different forms of lifting, right? Even things with running, there's different approaches to how somebody can set up that process for how they want to do that. Breath work is no different. Breath work is no different. There are a variety of different forms of breath work. There's holotropic breath work. There's semantic breath work. There's charging breath. There's Wim Hof. There's Tumo Inner Fire. There's resonance frequency breathing. I mean, there are a lot of different forms. Box breathing. There's all sorts of stuff, right? And I feel like one of the things that gets a little tricky is that people spend more time searching for the ideal technique, and almost jumping into a intellectual exercise of what is the best one, right? What's the one that's going to be the silver bullet? And what I always suggest is to replace a lot of that searching with breathing, because if you just start and you really incorporate it into your day-to-day life, the one that you choose is probably going to work pretty well. Right? It's probably going to work pretty well. But if you're like, well, I don't know, I didn't really feel it from this one, so I'm going to jump over to this one. And then this guru said this thing, and then this person just told me why this one is the best, so maybe I need to start doing that. Like that process of searching, I agree, it's good to always be exploring and seeking and things like that, but not in replacement of actually doing
start breathing first.
That's
Stop thinking about it. That's what my partner says. Like, he'll give me, medicines and things like holistic medicines. And he's always like, it doesn't work unless it's in you. So it's like, you can't think about when should I take it? Should I not? When should I, you know what I mean? Just get it in your body. And so it's the same thing that you're saying.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Entirely. And, it's one of those things that for me, I had the, and with addicts and alcoholics, it can be, it can be such an extreme state that we find ourselves in, that it makes it very convenient in terms of being able to observe when there is a powerful cause and effect. And so when I was in that first 30 days, 1,000 nights, and I was in a really rough spot, it became very clear to me that this thing just worked, right? This thing just worked. Whereas in perhaps more benign or more mild circumstances, you may not necessarily feel compelled the same way to do it. And because your state may not necessarily be as quote unquote extreme, the benefit of it may not necessarily be as crystal clear at first as it was for me that time, right? So a big part of what I like to do is be able to present it in a way to where it's very simple to do. So the two techniques that I orient my practice around and what I share with others in class, I combine them. During the rewire that I do every Sunday, we explore both and we understand the benefits of them and how to incorporate them into the day-to-day. But the first one is called resonance frequency breathing. This is a very simple technique. It's not dissimilar to what Tom told me to do, right? And it's a big focus within James Nestor's book, Breath, The New Science of a Lost Art. If anybody has not read that book, I highly recommend it. The way that he encapsulates the science behind everything is beautiful, as well as the historic origins, how it relates to other religious and meditative practices over the years where they've effectively been doing this in some way, shape, or form as well. He just brings it all together and just presents it in a way that's super powerful. And resonance frequency breathing is one that he talks about. That's one. The other one that I'm a big fan of is deep breathing with breath retention. Wim Hof, W-I-M-H-O-F, the Iceman, love him. He's done a ton over the last 15, 20 years to be able to really mainstream this. It also goes by other names like charging breath and cyclic hyperventilation and breath retention and Tumo inner fire from the Tibetan monks in the Himalayas. There's a component to it that is similar, but there's a lot more to that practice. So, people Google, they can be Googling those things, and they might be thinking, okay, well, how's this one different? There's the unifying thread of deep breathing with breath retention. And so I tend to just describe it and name it in a very simple manner that describes exactly what you're doing, but it kind of covers off on those areas. Those two techniques do different things. And so I'll talk a little bit about that. And they're two different tools that you can use. So resonance frequency breathing literally just consists of a 5.5 second inhale through the nose and a 5.5 second exhale through the nose with no pause in between. So now I don't know if that was exactly 5.5 seconds. I have some sound that's on my Instagram page that people can sync with. I can
that's awesome.
Pass along the link to you. But that technique, the reason why they call it resonance frequency breathing, I say it's the simplest technique with the most complicated sounding name. And what researchers have found is that breath pattern, that frequency of a 5.5 second inhale through the nose and a 5.5 second exhale through the nose, when our fight or flight response is engaged, when the sympathetic nervous system is engaged. And I always like to think of the sympathetic nervous system, the fight or flight response on one side of a continuum. And then on the other side of the continuum, we have the parasympathetic nervous system, which is effectively the chill part of our nervous system. So we can be in fight or flight mode, or we can be in chill, rest and relaxation, digestion mode. This side is red, this side is green. We want to live in the green more than the red. We do our best life work in the green, not in the red. 10,000 years ago, if we had to run from a tiger, helpful. In Target, dealing with a difficult cashier, not as much.
Right.
Right. Or just getting pissed about self-checkout. We don't even deal with cashiers anymore, right? So resonance frequency breathing is a very simple technique to be able to move us from the red into the green. If you do it for 3 minutes, 5.5-second inhale through the nose, 5.5-second exhale through the nose, for at least 3 minutes, we move ourselves from the red into the green. And the reason for that is that frequency, what researchers have found is that and I speak about it with a level of specificity, but generally if we're in this kind of 5 to 6 second range, what researchers have found is that all of these different systems in our body, when we're in fight or flight mode, when we're amped up, when we're engaged, when we're on high alert, when that sympathetic nervous system is engaged, when that happens, all of the other functions in our body that oscillate and swing back and forth go out of whack. They're not oscillating at their optimal frequency, whether that's the periodic nerve firing in our brain, our respiratory system, our cardiovascular system, our metabolism. It just all goes haywire. And we can't control those things, but the thing that we can control is how we breathe. And so if we can drop into that frequency for at least 3 minutes, it creates resonance with those other systems in our body that oscillate and gets them to be oscillating or swinging back and forth at their optimal level. And so that's why it's called resonance frequency breathing, because it creates resonance. That frequency creates resonance and can influence those other systems in our body, and then that chills us out. That moves us from the red to the green.
And just
if we do
to
it
be clear, that's the 5
minutes.
second breathing in and breathing out through your nose for 3 minutes. Like that's all that it takes.
Yep. That's all that it takes. And you know, that's basically what Tom told me to do.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And so, you know, the other thing that it does, so I recommend doing it for 20 minutes a day. And it's one of those deals where you can do it preemptively, proactively, just to kind of get yourself in a good place for the day. And then you can also do it reactively too. And we know those moments, right? Boom, that tinge of anger or alertness kind of sets in, you know, and it's like, I need to move out of this. And so those times are more reactive. And so for me, I like to do both. If I'm on a hike, I'm doing it. If I'm driving in the car, I'm doing it. If I find myself in a difficult situation, or I just got some news that is less than great, I'm dropping into it. If I wake up from a nightmare, and when you know, for me, I view nightmares as subconscious chewing on stuff that my conscious thinking doesn't maybe even really want to entertain yet. So the narrative that I wrap around nightmares, I don't view as negative. I'm like, thanks, subconscious, for chewing on that, right? But you hit a nightmare, you can wake up in a pretty fight or flight mode. Probably not the best.
It happened to me at 3 o'clock this morning. Bad. Like I was inside of a nightmare where I was hiding in a closet and there was like people slaughtering the town. And I think it's because I took a 5-HTP last night because I was trying it out for nighttime, but I think it just like took me somewhere else.
Yeah.
And my consciousness was saying, Carlie, you need to wake up. You need to wake up. And so I was like waking up, but I was still in this fight or flight feeling. And I was like, oh my God, I don't want to fall back asleep because I don't want to be hiding in a closet again, like in fear.
Yeah. Carlie, I'd like to ditch the breath work for the rest of this call and just talk and let's just focus on that dream and interpreting it.
We don't want to interpret my dreams. I promise. They make no sense.
I'm kidding. I'm joking. I'm joking. No, that's interesting. But yeah, I mean, to that point, right? Like just getting your
if I would have just been used to the practice of doing the breath work, which I now am going to do more of. See, I started doing breath work when I was also in the hardest time of my life. Like where you are at the bottom and you're just reaching out for anything that can pull you out, and that's when I started. I was like, okay, Wim Hof. Like I'll look up Wim Hof, and it was that learning how to not breathe for minutes at a time and fully surrendering. And like, that was insane. Cause I'm like, wow, your power lies here. Like, you don't even have to breathe. You're okay. Right. You don't have to breathe. And we're so used to that addictive needing to breathe all the time, just like needing to eat or needing to smoke or needing to drink or whatever it is, and just learning how to surrender. And then you can take a breath. It's power over your mind.
Right.
Yeah.
Entirely. Entirely. And, I've spent, I had some twists and turns through the medical psychiatric side of the world, and I've not that I'm resentful about it, but in hindsight, it really blows me away how often breathing isn't really a focus of that world as a foundational thing to then really understand what else needs to be layered on from a psychiatric standpoint. And for me, it's just
not even thought of. It's not even brought up unless somebody's hyperventilating. Like, unless they're already like ready to jump off the cliff, is it brought up that you should probably breathe?
Right.
It's not even, like you said, it's not a foundation where it should be.
Yeah. It kind of just, again, not resentful about it, but I was like, really, guys, couldn't somebody have brought this up? Why did it have to be Tom?
You're just now telling me.
It's like, yeah. So, I mean, a lot of I think it's so great, with YouTube and like the Huberman Lab podcast with Andrew Huberman. Thank God, because he's really helped to just lay out the science behind so much of why this works. And I think it allows people to it empowers people to be able to understand and incorporate it into their own practices.
Yeah, absolutely.
So can I jump back to the resonance frequency piece for a minute? Okay. So, whether it's waking up from a nightmare, being able to fall back in bed, doing it while you're driving proactively, or using it for a situation, it is so easy to incorporate that 5.5 second inhale, that 5.5 second exhale into your day to be able to move you from the red into the green. If you're in the green, you're likely going to be doing your best life work there versus just being in flight or fight mode. And one of the things that is also extremely powerful about it in terms of how it allows us to regulate and influence kind of where we sit on that continuum is the awareness that comes from it. We oftentimes, and I spent this for big chunks of my life, operating in a mode to where we are just blind to how we need to be operating. I am just in the red all the time. That is who Brian Deagan is. That's how I run. I'm a hard charger. F everybody. It's a tough way to live. And I lived that way blind for so long. And when we start to understand that we have the influence over that state, and we start to observe ourselves in that state versus just being the prisoner of that state, and we understand that breath is a tool to allow us to become the observer of that state and then move us over to the green, that becomes a very powerful thing. So in addition to the physiological benefits of what it does, the awareness that comes from that in terms of we are not the state that we are in. We can observe that state. We can influence that state. That becomes a very empowering thing for people. So, it doesn't happen overnight necessarily. But that one is such an easy technique. Couple other comments on it. One, if you deal with really bad anxiety, one of the first things that we do when our sympathetic nervous system is engaged, fight or flight mode, we get scared. We take a breath in, right? So this is a rough thing for people that have really bad anxiety, because a lot of times the thought of breathing or taking a deep breath in, even if it's gentle, is something that can be counterintuitive, not exactly comfortable. And so for somebody that is dealing with really rough anxiety, in that 5 to 6 seconds might feel like it's too much, just go as far as you can go. If that's 3 seconds in, 3 seconds out, keep it balanced, keep it through the nose. And the other thing that people oftentimes don't even realize is how shallow we breathe day in and day out. It's literally just upper chest, super shallow, right? And as soon as we expand the stomach, it brings the diaphragm down and opens up the lungs, and it makes it easier to extend the length of those inhales and those exhales. And so, just if somebody's dealing with really, rough anxiety, just be gentle with it. If you can't go 3 minutes, maybe go a minute, just build on it, but just start to incorporate it. And then the last thing that I'll say, Carlie, before we move on to the next technique, the Wim Hof stuff, is one of the big reasons. And this is something that I think is so funny about things like the 12 steps, and it's not unique to this 12 steps, but so oftentimes it's about being in the moment, right? Not thinking about the future, not getting worked up about the past, not worrying about other people, places, and things. If you apply those 5 filters to your thoughts, you cut out like 90% of the bullshit in your head. Right? Like if you're not thinking about the future, okay, that knocks out a bunch of this bullshit. I'm not thinking about the past, knocks out a bunch of that bullshit. I'm not thinking about this person over here, knocks out a bunch of bullshit over there. I'm not thinking about the IRS over here, knocks out that bullshit over there, right? Like people, places, and things, future, past, staying in the moment. Once you do that, it cuts out a lot of bullshit. There's not a whole lot to think about. And that's one of the things that's so nice about breath work, because as soon as we fall into that I'm just going to say the resonance frequency breathing, but as soon as we bring attention to breath and we're listening to it, it just brings us in the moment. We're thinking about the breath. We're not thinking about all those other things. And it becomes this very easy way to be able to, apply some of those principles that, people in the recovery community are super familiar with, but it's not unique to that. And so the breath is a good vehicle to get there. So I will shut up now, kick it back to you if you have any questions, comments, thoughts.
I think that it's really good that you're bringing up the addiction stuff and the mental health and all of that, because everybody has something, especially the anxiety and all that. I mean, our world is created to make you have those things. So to be this light warrior and be in your power, you got to learn techniques, real techniques that are going to help you become that Jedi, and breath is the first one. Yeah.
It is. It really is. If we're not breathing, right, we're dead. If we're not breathing right,
it's one thing too is just like everything that I teach, everything's a practice. We have to consciously practice it before it becomes a fluid reality. Even like for breath work for me, like that's why I wanted to do this with you, because I'm like, I really need to get this back in a practice for me, because for the most part, I'm very at a neutral space of peace. Okay, I don't have a lot of drama or nothing in my life, right? Good thing. But when something comes at me, I'm not used to it anymore. I used to be, alcoholic, right, psychopath, like running off of programs and addictions, you know what I mean? And I was always in that fight or flight type of thing, and now I'm not. So when it comes at me, it kind of throws me off and my whole nervous system, not even kidding. Like I was at work the other day and this lady just was coming at me with an attitude and I shut down. Like my heart started racing, my nervous system was shot, and I was like, okay, I'm either going to jump over the counter or I'm going to run into another room, and I can't do either. So I'm just standing there like dumbfounded, staring at her like, you know, and I didn't even think, hey, breathe at that moment, because it was that fight or flight. And I'm like, okay, am I gonna like resort to old things or am I going to chill the fuck out?
Right.
And you know what I mean? And it wasn't a practice enough for me to just be like, okay, how can I help you with this? You know, like, because I'm just not used to it. It totally threw me off. And I was like, damn, like I have got to practice some breath work so it becomes easy for me to do when those things occur, because they don't occur very often with me.
Yeah. It's and I you know, I very much operate from a place of progress, you know, not perfection at all, and I don't want it to be conveyed whatsoever. I would say that, you know, now things are definitely fewer and far between in terms of when I have reactions to things that I feel like I need to kind of clear up. I'm generally a little bit better at dealing with stuff in the moment. But a lot of times what's funny is it's almost easier to deal with the big stuff in the moment. Like, okay, here is a big thing, and I need to put all the tools in place to deal with this big thing that just presented itself in the moment. Clearly, this is a big thing. Okay, let's just really kind of engage with this thing, right? It's when there are these things, like my mom made a comment to me. I had spent a good chunk of time helping her with something for about 4 or 5 days. And we get to the very end of it. And it was something about how I needed to, you know, get some stuff to my brother-in-law, right? And she just made this comment. She's like, "You're selfish." And I just lost it. I just lost. I just lost it. You know, it was the last thing that I expected after 4 days. You know, and I'm not trying to be like self-righteous about it, right? But it was just like, and gone, fight or flight mode, mad as hell, boom, boom, boom. You know, but so those situations can still happen, but it's like at least when they do, the experience of it is so palatable and tangible, and like, oh, I just went there, that some awareness to be able to just,
well,
you know,
that
make some amends
now
shortly
you can get
thereafter,
yourself out of
clean
that
up this,
space, I'm
clean
sure,
up.
much faster than you would have been able to 5 years ago, 3 years ago.
Which it's such a good point, because there are, you know, when I have one of those moments, I'm like, my God, I live like that day in and day out for years. It's insane. It's
You know, that's why they call
like,
it the cherry on top, though. It's that little thing just right on top that just blows your cap, you know, and it happens.
It does, you know. So we are human, we are imperfect. It's all about awareness and progress.
Absolutely.
At least
Like,
that's how I approach it.
Why do people think that we get on here and talk about our vulnerable stuff and ways that we were able to pull ourselves out of it? It's because we're all human and we're all just looking for techniques and things to help us get to that green zone, like you said, because the red zone doesn't feel good and it's causing physical problems with our bodies. Yeah.
Right. Yep. Bodies, relationships, all
Everything. Oh
sorts
my
of
God.
stuff.
It's everything. And everything is just energy. And it's like,
everything.
you know, that's why like even like stubbing your toe, something as small as that, and like how bad that pisses us off as humans. Because it's just that one small thing that's like the pain in it is so intense from one small thing, and it's like, and we all do that too. Like, like can't even like think or function. All we can do is breathe. Don't talk to me. Don't look at me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is it broke? Do I have to go to the hospital? Okay, it's not. I can move through this. It's so good. So we've got like what about 17 minutes, 16
be done
minutes
on
here,
the dot,
right?
or we'll lose the whole live. So probably like 15 minutes or less. Yeah.
Okay. So I think, you know, the first part of that, the resonance frequency breathing, that breath pattern, you know, to me, that is reflective of a lot of different breath techniques that are really oriented around engaging with our nervous system and moving us from the red to the green, right? So that's one. The other one that I am a big fan of, and I'm not going to necessarily go through the whole structure of it right now, or demo it or anything like that. I want to be sensitive to time, but is the deep breathing and breath retention, the Wim Hof, the charging breath, the cyclic hyperventilation with breath retention, those terms that I used before, different flavors, but that deep breathing and breath retention, I am a big fan of that. And I'm a big fan of that for four specific reasons that I'll go into. And as I go into them, I'll talk a little bit about the structure as well, if that works. Is that good, Carlie? Okay. So, number one, when we're doing the deep breathing and breath retention, we're doing two things. We're doing deep breathing. We do it for a period of time. And when we do that, we are deliberately engaging our sympathetic nervous system. We are getting back to what I had mentioned before. When we're scared, what do? We take that deep breath in. When we stub our toe, what do we do? Right? When we get hit with that. So unlike resonance frequency breathing, where we're trying to go from the red to the green, with this breath pattern, with the deep breathing as part of something like Wim Hof, we are deliberately engaging that. We want to create some discomfort. We want there to be intent behind it. We're not hyperventilating, but we're breathing at a pace and with an intent that is to engage that sympathetic nervous system to create some discomfort. And also we want the inhales and the exhales to be very full because we want to be able to really oxygenate the blood while we're doing that, right? So when we're doing that, and what has been proven and the research shows is whether we're doing something like that or whether we're doing something like cold exposure, when we expose ourselves to pain, when we deliberately, and it has to be deliberate, it has to be self-induced, put ourselves into an alert state where we're putting ourselves in a place of discomfort or some pain, two things happen. One, we start to condition ourselves so our, let's just call it our threat reflex trigger, right? Our trigger level. We increase the tolerance of it. So if we can put ourselves in that mode for a period of time each day, at least 5 minutes, then when we get outside of doing that and we're just living life, stuff doesn't necessarily hit us the same way because we're making our threshold stronger, if you will, our tolerance stronger to bullshit. That's the best way to think about it. Like we self-induce ourselves feeling some bullshit, and so then we can deal with bullshit better when we're outside of it. Another Andrew Huberman research topic, which is great. The other thing too, and there's a great book, Dopamine Nation. I don't know if you've had a chance to check it out, but anytime we get a dopamine hit, our body is just going after a feeling of homeostasis. So we get some dopamine over here. The brain is going to counter that and deregulate dopamine to get us back to sort of a balanced state, right? That's part of the cycle of addiction. There's other stuff in terms of compulsion and behavior. I'm not going to go into all of that right now. A lot of that we focus on the rewires on Sunday. But when we put ourselves into a state of discomfort or pain, I'm not saying crazy pain, I'm just saying some discomfort, we essentially get the benefit of, okay, we're doing something that is less than great. So our brain says, oh, okay, I need to get back to homeostasis. So I'm going to kick off some dopamine here so we feel good. So that's why when you do something like cold exposure for, a couple minutes, 3 minutes, 5 minutes, whatever it might be, your brain says, whew, that was rough. That was some pain, right? So I think what I'm going to do is kick off some dopamine here over the next couple of hours to like level you out. And that's why people feel good when they do something like cold exposure. And that's the same thing that is happening when we're engaging our sympathetic nervous system with that breathing technique, right? We're creating some discomfort. So I like it for that reason. The other piece is that when we do the deep breathing with breath retention, we don't hold our breath on the inhale. So we're doing deep breathing, we get the time, and then we exhale. And when we exhale, we're engaging the parasympathetic nervous system. We're engaging the green side, right, of our nervous system. And then we exhale, 75% of our lung capacity, and we go into that breath hold in a very relaxed state. So we're engaging the red, we're engaging the green within one cycle. And when you toggle back and forth like that, it kicks off a bunch of self-produced dopamine, opioids, and serotonin. And so it is a great brain reset. It is a great day reset. If I have a long day at work, if I'm doing a bunch of stuff, and then I know that I've got an hour, and then I've got 4 to 5 hours of kid stuff in the evening, I will effectively restart my day with the deep breathing and breath retention around that 5 to 6 period, so I can reset my mind to get going. So it is a great brain reset. It is a great day reset. 10 minutes. The third reason why I really like it, one of the things that happened to me this go around was that I felt like my recovery and how the 12 steps have been embedded in me. And I don't care if it's a 12 steps, if it's Jesus, if it's meditation, if it's your therapist, I don't care what sort of cognitive tool you're using, right? But this technique makes the brain more malleable to adopt whatever that cognitive toolkit is that you are working on. Because breath work, and great Jack Feldman, godfather of breath brain science, On with Huberman podcast is out there. You can check it out. One of the things that he said, which was an epiphany to me, because I could see this stuff, these new thoughts, new behaviors. For me, gratitude was always a very reactive thing. I'd be super pissed and I'd be like, I have to do a gratitude list now. I am thankful for, so like I'm doing it in this, like I'm doing a gratitude list while I'm in a state of rage, and one of the things that was really funny was, as I was doing this technique and just doing my program, I was like, my God, like I'm just grateful. I'm just grateful. Like I'm not all the time, but like it's becoming more of like my natural state versus this other state where then the gratitude list was this tool, but it wasn't necessarily a state of being. And I was almost just observing my thoughts and stuff, and I'm like, who is this guy? And then I listened to this podcast, and Jack Feldman had said, breath work is a mild form of electroconvulsive therapy. We have a lot of neural circuitry when we think about a lot of the emotional states that we can find ourselves in, different psychiatric conditions. Those things translate to neural circuitry in our brain. They become the go-to path for how we go, right? And we have breathing patterns that are unconscious to us that we fall into that just further ingrain those ruts in our mind. And even the most mild forms of breath work help to disrupt those patterns and effectively disrupt those neural pathways. And so it makes the brain more malleable. It increases the neuroplasticity of our brain. Breath work can do that. Now, you need to lay down some new wiring, right? You can't just do that. But, again, that's kind of where I was getting back to, if you're going to Bible study, if you're going to a therapist, if you're doing some combination, if you're doing the 12 steps, whatever, right? They're all good things. They're all life furthering things, right? Pairing the breath work with one of those things, you're making the brain more malleable, you're disrupting those neural pathways, and then you can lay down new wiring.
With whatever tool that you are using. with the breath work. Like you can't absorb, your 12 steps if you aren't able to get present because you're thinking about the past. Right.
100%. If you're in the red,
do you have a
luck,
breathing
right?
technique that you would like to share with anybody for just their day-to-day that they could start doing today?
Well, that's so just real quick. Let me finish off on the fourth on the deep breathing and the breath retention, the fourth point. So, when we think about so much of what ails us is when we're just operating out of self. And if we're operating out of self and it's very egocentric, then we tend to be more sensitive to anger. We tend to be more sensitive to fear. We tend to be more sensitive to shame, guilt, remorse, regret, all that type of stuff if we're in self, right? And one of the things that you had talked about when, discussing Wim Hof or the deep breathing with the breath retention is that when you go into a breath hold and you go into that space in a very relaxed way, it goes from meditative to psychedelic if you do it over time. When the breath holds go from 30 seconds to a minute to 2 minutes to 3 minutes to 4 minutes, you go into a place that is very much outside of self as it progresses over time. And Abraham Maslow talked about peak experiences, and he was working to demystify religious experiences and spiritual experiences. And his main point was, hey, look, they can come from a lot of different places, and they all have these characteristics. There's this feeling of timelessness. There's this feeling of connectedness. There's this feeling of profound positivity bordering on sacred. There's this aspect of not really being able to put it into words. And during those breath holds, that happens. It is a means to be able to generate these peak experiences to take us out of self. And that was always my biggest problem, is that I would be so wrapped up in self. I'd be so wrapped up in anger. I love guided meditations. Do not get me wrong. But when my mind is going like that, I couldn't slow my mind enough to really get into a meditative place. Whereas the deep breathing with breath retention, it would just, as soon as I got into the first breath hold, I would be going down that path. So to answer your question, I'll get to that technique, which is really the first one. But deep breathing, breath retention, Wim Hof, cyclic hyperventilation with breath retention, whatever, right? Conditioning our fight or flight response, being able to lower or increase our bullshit threshold in life, that's one of the benefits. The brain reset, day reset, that's another benefit. The neuroplasticity, making our brain more susceptible to be able to learn new behaviors, new thoughts, that's another benefit. And then being able to self-generate these peak experiences to get us out of self, that's the other benefit. That's why I love it. That's why I teach it. That's the one, 3 to 5 times a week, 20 to 30 minutes a day. You need to be able to set aside some time to be able to do it. It's a little bit more involved. Come to the class if you want to do it. My full class is actually on my Instagram if you want to check it out. But to your question, the resonance frequency breathing, that 5.5 second inhale through the nose, the 5.5 second exhale through the nose, balanced, continuous, 20 minutes
and
a day.
And it's so easy.
3-minute stretches. It's so easy. It's so easy.
Right. And for anybody
really
that's just coming on, what we're talking about is the 5.5 breaths in through your nose and out through your nose without any hold, right?
Yep. 5.5 second inhale through the nose, 5.5 second exhale through the nose.
I mean, just that alone makes you feel high. Like if you'll just take the time to take a breath, you can feel it throughout your whole body. You're like, life is good, man.
Right.
You just need to breathe.
Yep, that's it. Life is good. That's right. Like
just
Tom
breathe.
said, you breathe, man.
Well, I appreciate you being on here. I know you do a live rewire. Is that a Zoom thing? We've got like 1 minute or 2 minutes.
Every Sunday, 8 p.m. It's a 12-week. I hesitate to even call it a course, but it's a 12-week process that we go through it and combines breath work with some concepts from the 12 steps and also the neuroscience as to why it all works, and that provides some hope to people in terms of why it can work. So that's every Sunday. It's free, no cost. It's a pay it forward
thing. That's awesome.
So just DM me if you want to sign up. I just need an email address.
Well, thank you so much for all of your knowledge. That was so great and so fruitful.
Thank you for the opportunity, Carlie. It was great talking with you, and too funny that that you're originally or you got family
very
out
bizarre.
Nashville, right?
It always has a synchronicity, I swear.
That's awesome. I know. Yeah, I don't try to even explain why all that stuff happens, but it seems
so
to,
thank you,
right?
everybody. Thank you. And they can just find your Instagram through this. They can find my Instagram through this. And I'll be making some short clips of this and highlighting them and putting them out for the next week. So you'll have those too. Okay. All right.
Okay.
Thanks.
Awesome.
See you guys. Bye.
Thanks, Carlie. Take care. All right. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.